Análisis, colleagues, Imina 35 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. Colleagues, we are now on Bill 413-35 COR. I will acknowledge Senator Sabina Perez at this time. Assistant Majority Leader.
Sainama Asi Masgahalu. I have a point of order that I want to bring forward. And I bring this forward because I have great respect for our institution. And we adopted our standing rules for a reason. It was to have order and to have us all go forward with decorum and for the members to feel respected. So I just want to remind us all of Section 1.02 D2, that the majority leader shall be recognized ahead of others for purposes of making procedural motions. And to just call on all of us to do our part in recognizing that, because, well, it hasn't always been recognized. So to just encourage us in these last few days to continue recognizing that rule.
Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Mrs. Uzmasi, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 413-35 COR as introduced, sponsored by myself, Senator Sabina Flores Perez, co-sponsored by Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes and Senator Joe S. San Agustin. It's an act to add a new section 67101.7 of Chapter 67, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, relative to adopting the 2017 Guam Tropical Energy Code, known as GTEC, to renumber existing sections 67101.7 and 67101.8 of Chapter 67, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, and to amend the relevant sections of the locally adopted building codes. I move to place it on the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
Senator Perez, I will allow you to discuss. You are recognized.
That's Uzmasi. Bill 14-35 adopts the Guam Tropical Energy Code, which is a set of building standards promoting energy conservation, and it was specifically developed by local experts for use in Guam's tropical climate. Buildings consume over 40% of all energy and over 70% of all electricity used in the United States. Buildings in the U.S. also account for 40% of the nation's carbon dioxide emissions. This code would reduce the overall cost of home ownership and limit Guam's carbon footprint. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Speaker Munoz-Barnes and Senator Joe S. San Agustin. Once enacted, GTEC will set minimum standards for lighting, air conditioner unit ratings, and other construction methods and standards that impact energy use. Such standards will apply to new construction on Guam, as well as remodeling projects to existing structures that are significant enough to require a building permit. Utilization of a building energy code is not a new practice for Guam. For decades, Guam enforced a minimum building energy code. However, when Public Law 30-199 updated Guam's building and fire codes in September of 2010, the decision was not to adopt the International Energy Efficiency Code, as it required construction measures unsuited for Guam's climate. It was more suited to cold weather climates. Instead, Public Law 30-199 mandated that the newly created Guam Building Code Council review, amend, and adopt the Model Tropical Energy Code for use on Guam. The Model Tropical Energy Code was itself a federally funded energy conservation code based on widely used industry standards and provided for use by tropical jurisdictions, namely Hawaii, American Samoa, Saipan, Puerto Rico, and Guam, as a starting point from which to develop localized energy codes. The CNMI adopted the Model Tropical Energy Code, or MTEC, outright, and it has been enforced for over a decade. Public Law 30-199 envisioned taking the Model Tropical Energy Code and further adding features and flexibility to serve Guam's needs. With the aid of the Guam Energy Office, the Guam Building Code Council met regularly to fine-tune the code, and local experts have devoted hundreds of ours in developing these standards. The Guam Building Code Council held numerous public meetings, trainings, and conferences during which feedback was collected from contractors, real estate professionals, engineers, architects, and the general public. In addition to the Guam Code Council, GTEC was further developed with the help of the Guam Energy Office, the Guam Energy Task Force, the Guam Chamber of Commerce, Department of Public Works, Guam Fire Department, Guam Contractors Association, the Guam Society of Professional Engineers, Guam and Micronesia chapters of the American Institute of Architects, and the Guam Association of Realtors. The resulting Guam Tropical Energy Code before us is the result of this extensive work. Now more than ever, as a global pandemic decimates our local economy, we must lay the foundation for a strong economic recovery. GTEC will keep millions of dollars circulating in Guam by reducing our reliance on oil and will reduce the cost of home ownership. Cash is Guam's biggest export, and we send hundreds of millions of dollars off island every year to purchase diesel for our power plants. In 2019, it was over about $250 million. By requiring minimum energy standards in new construction, we can significantly reduce the export of cash from our struggling economy and prevent the proliferation of energy inefficient homes that hurts the renters and local resale market. Energy codes are a win-win for realtors, contractors, homeowners. The dollar value of the building increases, but the increased costs are spread over a long-term mortgage, all without impacting the borrowing capacity of a home buyer. Federally backed mortgage programs even exclude the cost of energy-efficient construction when calculating a borrower's maximum loan amount, so potential homeowners' borrowing threshold remains unaffected. In short, by adopting the GTEC, realtors and contractors will be able to boost Guam's economy by developing more valuable properties, but the cost to homeowners decreases through a significant reduction in power bills. The monthly mortgage plus the power bill are cumulatively lower starting from day one for construction that meets GTEC standards. Furthermore, after energy efficiency costs are fully recouped in 5 years, a homeowner continues to realize greater savings for the remaining of the traditional 30-year mortgage. Lastly, as reflected in Bill 413-35, our current building codes reference the International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC. The IECC is an inappropriate code for Guam. It mandates insulation and features intended to protect cold weather climates. And I would like to thank the good chair of the Committee on Public Safety, Border Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, Mayor's Council, Infrastructure and Public Transit for holding a public hearing on this important measure on December 4th. Environmental businesses, architects, building developers are represented at the hearing, and there was broad support for this bill with no opposition. And I ask my colleagues now that we take this final step and adopt this important building energy code to help our economy and our environment. Energy codes worked in Guam for decades. They momentarily elapse when our building codes were last updated, but the intent was always to develop a responsive, localized version. Our local architects, engineers, contractors, realtors, and other stakeholders have worked hard to develop GTEC, and it's time we completed the mandate of Public Law 30-199 and reestablished this critical code. GTEC will save our community millions of dollars, which would have otherwise gone off island to purchase fuel. And it will increase the value of construction to our local real estate industry while reducing the cost of home ownership. GTEC is a timely win-win that will help spur our strong economic recovery that our island needs. Situas Masi.
Buen provecho, Senator in Paris. On the main motion, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Therese Terlai, you are recognized. Good morning.
Good morning, Speaker and colleagues. And I want to rise in support of this bill and actually commend the author and those who worked on this bill for many years. It looks like it's a culmination of work over 6 years long. And when I watched the public hearing, the consensus was they were almost celebrating that it finally has come to this point that they, will be enacting this code that they feel is a win-win for homeowners going forward. This code will not impact existing residences. It's going to impact those in the moving forward, and yet, however, it's going to create savings for those homeowners going forward in energy costs quite significantly. And they call it, what did they say, a basic, kind of like a basic regulations that they've adopted here. And they want it to be something that is, or they call it standard, right? And so there's nothing extraordinary here that they think that homeowners or people wanting to build homes are not going to be able to afford. So I want to recognize the work of the, Building Code Council, the chairman, Mr. Brent Wise, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, and if the sponsor could also tell us the other members of this council, but they've made exceptions for existing buildings, they've made exceptions for utility buildings, they've made exceptions for historical buildings as they thought might be necessary in order to keep the historical integrity of some of those buildings. However, yes, again, for buildings going up after adoption of this code, this should be a win-win for the people of Guam. So just want to thank again the sponsor for bringing this forward and all of those who put much time and effort into it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Senator Therese. Anyone else on the main motion? Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
I also rise in support. I see a lot of value in adopting the Guam Tropical Energy Code, and as is mentioned in the legislative intent and mentioned by the author herself, there were numerous stakeholders from a wide breadth of our society, of our community, who participated in the developing of this. There were numerous public hearings, trainings, and conferences, and that this is promoting energy efficiency. This is promoting reducing reliance on foreign oil and carbon emission. It is potentially increasing the value of the properties of owners of those properties, as well as reducing costs for homeowners and renters, and keeping money within our community that would otherwise be sent off island. So each of these also works towards sustainability, but it has many benefits beyond that. And I just want to note all of that in a statement of support. So just Masi.
Buen provecho, Senador and Taitsano. Anyone else on the main motion? Anyone else? If not, Senator Perez, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a couple of questions for the sponsor.
Please state your questions.
Is the only decrease of home ownership going to be because of the impact to the power costs? And do we have a rough estimate on how much that decrease will be?
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Perez, would you like to yield?
Yes, I yield to the question. So I don't have an update on the power bill, but so in regards to, in one of the studies that was done, they did, I believe, a 7-year study, and they found that a GTEC home versus a non-GTEC home, they found that there was a reduction in consumption, a 50% reduction in consumption of energy consumed, which is pretty considerable. So in regards to dollar amount, as far as current estimates, so roughly it's about, I believe it's $6 per square foot. So the most expensive part of this would be the rooftop insulation, and that would be $6 per square foot. So if you add on to the, like the HVAC system, the lighting, the windows, roughly an estimate would be about $10,000 is my guess. So it could increase based on the square footage, though.
Okay, that sounds like it's more of a, thank you, Madam Speaker, it sounds more of a business explanation because of HVAC systems and 10,000 square footage. So I'm just thinking about the impact to the homeowner and if they would have to pay any cost up front to meet these GTEC requirements as proposed.
I have information, point of information. So there's these federally mortgages that one can apply for, and what it would do is it would amortize this additional investment over a 30-year, let's say a 30-year loan. And so the amount of savings, so if you're saving 50% potentially on your energy bill, plus if you add that plus the mortgage, if you amortize that over a 30-year mortgage, you end up paying less together with those two. So you end up with a property that has higher value, but you pay less on a monthly basis. So it's kind of counterintuitive because it would not require more money. It would actually end up, the homeowner would end up paying less money if you include the mortgage and the power bill together.
Vice Speaker Nelson, does that help?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And is the federal mortgage that the sponsor is speaking of like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or are there other types of mortgages that are specific to help the homeowner in meeting the minimum energy standards?
So I don't have
Senator
the
Paris.
Yes, thank you. I yield to the question. So there are, various banks that have these services that can provide these services, but because there wasn't much demand here on Guam, it has been utilized. But I can verify. I believe Fannie Mae is one of those, but I can verify the actual. Fannie Mae is one of them.
Vice Speaker
thanks.
Nelson.
Thanks.
So, Madam Speaker, this is specifically for individuals who are looking to purchase homes today and in the future, and everyone else will be grandfathered into this minimum energy standards, if I understand correctly. But if an individual would like to put their house on the market, would that have an impact to this requirement of minimum energy standards?
Thank you. Senator Paris, would you like to yield?
Yes, I will to the question. So, so basically, it does not apply to any existing structures.
Mm-hmm.
It applies to new construction and renovations that require permits. So it would not affect any property that's currently existing.
And if the person would like to put their home on market, would that have an impact?
Senator Paris.
Well, perhaps if it's it doesn't affect, so it doesn't require the homeowner to comply with GTEC, if that's the question. It would not require a homeowner who's putting their house up for sale to comply with GTEC. So it only applies to new construction, renovations that require a permit.
Vice Speaker Nelson.
So just to clearly state for the record that if an individual would like to sell their home on the market, there is no requirement for them to meet the requirements of this bill for minimum energy standards.
Senator Paris.
Yes, I yield to the question, and that's absolutely correct. It does
Thank
not
you.
apply.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if I heard correctly, the sponsor mentioned a 50% decrease in power consumption with the new minimum energy standards. How is that defined and measured? How do we measure and define energy standards?
Thank you. Senator Paris, would you like to yield?
So just for clarification, the study was done on a modest home. So what they did is they compared two homes, and one with GTEC, one without, and that's where they got that information. So if you want to look at minimum standards, it's all listed in the 2017 Guam Tropical Energy Code. And it's very technical, and they have different sections, one relating to HVAC, one to building envelope. And really the upshot of this is how to insulate a home in order to prevent the need for cooling. So that's really the biggest consumption of energy in our buildings, is the need to cool interiors. And so a lot of the different features of this Guam Tropical Energy Code addresses that. And so whether, for instance, the windows have enough insulation, the rooftop, the cool roof, there's some specific specifications that would require it to be compliant with GTEC. Then there's also, so a lot of that is more of the insulation aspect of it. And so the great thing about GTEC, so it's very different from the Model Tropical Energy Code, which is more prescriptive. And what's great about GTEC, it does allow for alternative, and it's called the trade-off option. And so it's very technical. I can't say that I can completely explain that, but it was created by local engineers, local engineer on Guam. So there's an alternate way to establish minimum standards for a building envelope, whether it can be insulate the interior from heat. And so they provide an alternate method. And so if you can't go through the prescriptive route, there is a different way you can go through it, as long as you meet these the calculations. And I can't explain it. Basically, it allows for variations to occur. So that's what I can offer at this point.
If the sponsor is willing to give the technical explanation for the definition of minimum energy standards, I'm open to listening to it.
I'm sorry, Vice Speaker, can you please
Can the
repeat?
sponsor, she said that the sponsor stated that that she was unable to go into the definition of minimum energy standards because of its technicality. If she's able to explain it, the technicality of the minimum energy standards, I'm open to listening if the sponsor would yield.
Senator Paris, would you like to yield?
Okay, so if I can, basically I can point the information to the different, I'm sorry, if I can just ask a follow-up question. Do I need to go through the whole table list?
Senator Paris, I'm just going to take a moment's recess so that you can confer, and then we'll get back on. I'll take a moment's recess. Y minuto 35 en la legislatura en Guam is back from recess. There was a question that was yielded to the author of the bill, so Senator Parrish, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, there was, I guess, a discussion regarding enactment dates and potentially extending the date of enactment. So I need time for that amendment, if, or.
Yes, you do, and you're still recognized at this time, Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't oppose this bill. However, there is a concern that I have is the cost for the new homeowner builder. Now, we discussed the different types of loan during the recess, and this loan is that a new homeowner who is building, this loan that the homeowner can avail to is the energy efficient mortgage. And what I was inquiring about was the interest rate of this mortgage. We don't know. Can we use this mortgage with another type of mortgage like first homeowner, first home buyer's mortgage? And that is still a question unanswered. So really I understand that this is a great energy standards and that we're redefining it, and perhaps we have worked for 6 years to get this piece of legislation together and to be put on the floor and to move it. However, the huge concern I have is that how it's going to impact families of 3 or more, or even just a general person that wants to build a home and is unable to build a home because they won't meet the threshold for the energy, then won't meet the threshold cost, what it will be required from GTAC. And that's the only concern. If there's absolutely no burden on the people that are trying to survive today through this COVID and trying to build a house because rent is going up and it's going to be difficult for them to have a roof over their head, if no burden will be passed to the people, Madam Speaker, then yes, let's do it. But I don't see it very prudent for the government to be pushing this on the backs of the people when we don't even have the same standards initially for ourselves to lead the way for our people to meet these GTEC standards. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Piro Terlai.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I rise in support of the bill, but I have some inclination on saving and all that because, you know, I've been in the construction industry for such a long time. And if we impart this new code to the new buildings, it's going to cost more. If we're going to install the, to reduce the, the energy efficient type of building, I think the building itself is going to cost more. But and I can say that in the long run, there's going to be savings there, but on the initial construction of a building, it's going to cost more. And I guess I echo the previous speaker regarding what she had mentioned about the cost of the building. And energy conservation in the long run is there. But I don't think on the initial part of construction, a new building, and I want to know what building code are we talking about? Are we talking about the installation of insulated ceiling placement within the building? Are we talking about increasing the height of the building itself? What code are we talking about?
Senator Parrish, would you like to yield?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield to the question. So what GTEC has is specifications for different parts of a building. For instance, the roofing, putting in cool roofs, insulated windows, LED light. Oh, it doesn't have LED, it has CFL. So technology has changed. The SEER ratings of air conditioned. So at the time they had 13 SEER, and what currently is being provided in the market is much higher, and the cost is either stayed the same or gone down. So the equipment costs pretty much stabilized or gone down. The insulation of cool roofs is roughly $6 per square foot. So those are the roughly about the estimate of about $10,000. Is the cost of GTEC.
Senator Pito?
Madam Speaker, the standard height for a single story building, for a single story family building, is usually like 9 feet. Are we going to increase it to at least 10 or 11 feet under the code?
Senator Paris?
No, there's nothing in here that would require changing the size. But there is a trade-off portion. So, I'm not an architect or engineer, and I'm sure that there's other ways of creating a cooler environment, cool interior environment. Just as long as
I would
the
think that the installation of insulated ceiling after they pour the slab on top of the building, there's going to be an insulation that's going to be installed within the house, inside the house.
Senator Pito, you can address it to the podium. Would you like her to yield? Would you like Senator Paris to yield to that question, sir?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Paris, would you like to yield?
Yes, I yield to the question. I did speak with one of the engineers, and it was mentioned that it could be either on top or underneath. So perhaps his recommendation was probably underneath, because it can stay longer. It can preserve longer.
Senator Pito, does that help answer your question?
Partially, Madam Speaker, but I want to find out if they're going to increase the height of the building from 9 feet, because that's the standard height for any single-story building. That's the height, that's the requirement under the code. Are they going to increase it to really be more energy efficient and install the insulated ceiling within that building? That's what I want to know. What code are we talking about?
Point of information, Madam Speaker. So
Please state your point of information, Senator
So-
Paris. I will allow it.
in the building code currently, it references the International Energy Conservation Code, and that's what's currently in existence now. And that requires even a higher cost. It's adapted to cold climates. And by just changing that to the Guam Tropical Energy Code, it's more adapted to Guam. And these standards were created by local engineers and architects to make sure it fits Guam. So it would be, if you look at it, it should be cheaper than what's currently in the building code right now.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Senator Pito?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't think my question was answered, but that's okay, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Pito. Anyone else on the main motion? Minority Leader, you're recognized.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity. I have a question to the author, if she should yield.
State your question, please.
It was stated earlier by one of our colleagues regarding kind of like a grandfathering scenario. So in the public hearing, I asked about grandfathering scenarios, and it was mentioned by Brent Wise that there was no grandfathering in this new rules and regs. So is that true? There's no grandfathering at all?
Thank you. Senator Paris, would you like to yield?
Yes, I yield to the question. So it does not apply to any existing structures. So there's no need for grandfathering.
Okay.
It only applies to new buildings and new renovations. So there isn't a need for the grandfathering.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Minority Leader, does that help?
Yes, it does. In fact, it was mentioned earlier, the same scenario. It only applies to new buildings. However, there was a comment made that it also applies to any time you get a permit. So if you have a home currently now and you're doing some renovations, whether you're touching the rooftop or not, you're just doing renovations because you have to get a permit if you're going to do any certain types of renovations. So it was mentioned earlier by the author of the bill that this would apply if you went to get a permit. So if I was just making not an extension, but renovating the inside of my home and need a permit, will I be required? So another question, Madam Speaker, sorry, but will I be required to meet these new codes?
Thank you. I will ask, Senator Paris, could you yield to that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I do yield to the question. So if you take a look at the Guam Tropical Energy Code compliance requirements, Section 3.01B, so it talks about that additions, alterations, renovations, or repairs to those parts of the existing building that are affected by this code or parts thereof, buildings, systems, or portions thereof shall conform to the provisions of this code. Unaltered portions of the existing building or building system shall not be required to comply with this code. So basically what that's saying is that the portion that's going to be repaired, renovated, altered, that's the portion that's going to comply. Everything else, so for instance, if you're changing the roofing, for instance, it applies only to the roof. It doesn't apply to everything else in that building.
Okay.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, and I think it's very important for the public to realize that too as well. It does apply only to new buildings, new homes that are going to be renovated, but when it comes to, erected, but for renovations, it's very important that the people realize that it would not affect it unless it only has to do with the roof, if you're changing out your roof scenario. This has been in the plans for many, many years, according to the public hearing of Mr. Brent Wise, who's been there for quite some time, and I have to give a shout out to thank him so much for using his professional and his time to assist in creating these rules and regs that would actually, help to lessen our footprint on using, energies they're not good for our environment. So I appreciate all the work that they've done toward this, and I know that it's not perfect, this legislation. There is some kinks in it that need to be weeded out, but that's what happened during the first fire code in the 30th Guam Legislature that was passed. It met with a lot of oppositions, issues, and problems, utilizing some of the rules and regs that pertained only to the United States and didn't really be applicable to Guam because we usually don't have wooden structures, put up. So though as we move forward too, I'm sure that if there's any concerns that the public may have, they will come forward. But I think it's a start, a good start. And if you look at the sign-in sheet when they had the public hearings on the rules and regs, you'll find quite a bit of people that attended during that time. That's why I was quite surprised that we only had a few people attend. Carlos Camacho, who many of us know, he's a developer himself, who had concerns first on this legislation that was actually vetoed at one point. And then now they started up and addressed all these concerns and issues that they had before. So it's taken a long journey to get where it's at. And again, it's not perfect, but it's a start. And I greatly appreciate all those who contributed to making this happen. And I'm sure that we'll be listening to more people, even though if this bill should pass, any of the concerns. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Minority Leader. Vice Speaker, do you have a point of information?
Yes, I do, Madam Speaker. Just as a point of information, because in my simplicity of things, when I hear the word building, I'm thinking of perhaps something like a commercial building, a structure. But this is going to require every building to include a new home that will be built that must comply with this. The square footage that is required would be 1,200 square feet. So if you're going to build a home and your home is going to be bigger than 1,200 square feet, you will have to comply, if this bill should pass, to GTEC requirements that could add an additional cost of $10,000 to $15,000 or more.
Thank you. On the main motion, Senator Mary Torres, I will acknowledge you this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the author will yield, I'm interested in knowing if there was any economic evaluation done to study the impact versus the savings that will be realized, because it is stated in the legislative intent and findings that the energy savings measures prescribed in the codes will pay for themselves in under 5 years. So is that study or the evaluation available for review on what the impact would be to builders?
Senator Paris, would you like to yield to that?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that question. I need to go through the documents, and unfortunately, a lot of the studies that were done were in 2014, so things might have changed at that point. But in doing some calculations recently, I can perhaps need a recess.
Well, if I may just continue
Senator
on the
Torres.
point. And I think that that's what's important for everybody to understand as we contemplate this, because we have had over the past several years an issue with the availability of construction workers on Guam as a result of the H-2B issues and the cap on the H-2B visas. Secondly, the low availability of construction workers has also driven up the prices on Guam significantly for people who aspire to even build their first homes. And so if you're now using a study that was in 2014, which was almost 7 years ago, that was at a time when maybe the cost of construction was reasonable. Since then, it's skyrocketed. And having this sort of a tropical code mandated, I think will clearly the impact has to be considered at a time when Guam is not only reeling from high construction costs, the low availability of construction workers presently, and what that would mean in terms of being a deterrent for people to afford to build a home. I know this body has taken a lot of measures to incentivize first-time home ownership or access to home ownership, and this might, because of the timing on Guam, not only with our economic downturn, but just the whole construction climate and the cost of construction on Guam per square foot, this really might be a death knell to a lot of people in their dreams to even build a home. So I think that study, what that impact is very important, because sometimes just a little bit more is enough to not make the building of a home affordable if you're required to do this, many of these standards by law. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Parrish, you may close.
Moment's recess, I need to produce amendment. I believe it's sent to the clerks.
It's been uploaded. You may proceed. You have a couple of amendments, Senator Parrish.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Are we, okay.
You may proceed.
So the First Amendment is SFPL 23P7, and it's basically to extend the enactment date from 6 months to a year from the date of enactment. The reason for this is it would allow more opportunities for a phasing approach to occur. So we'll have the commercial buildings, perhaps, I believe the commercial buildings would definitely, would like to do this. In fact, during the public hearing, it was well received, and in fact, some of them felt it was not strict enough. And it would also allow, for homeowners who want to build a new home to voluntarily to comply with GTEC, and to have those perhaps be the testimonials for this type of energy code.
On the amendment, are there any objections? Anyone wishing to speak? Vice Speaker Nelson, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment and change the date from 1 year to 2 years. And the reason why, Madam Speaker, is what some of our colleagues have shared is the impact of construction costs, the situation that the economy is facing today, where a lot of people have lost their jobs. We all know that to build a house takes about 1 year to 2 years, and to be able to even meet the credit score, to have an interest rate, to just build a house on Guam alone is very difficult and costly, especially for a small home. And this would give people the opportunity to see that this is a requirement that will happen in 2 years, and they can start preparing for it. Because the whole process to build a home takes more than 1 year, especially when the government keeps on closing its doors for permitting and such. And especially since we are an extension of the government as this legislative body, to compromise with the people because the services are difficult to be provided for them at this time.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. There has been an amendment to the Paris proffered amendment to extend it from 1 year to 2 years. Anyone wanting to speak on that amendment? Minority Leader, you're recognized.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. I don't have an objection to this, to the amendment to the amendment. It makes sense. I mean, we're all in dire times. The businesses have, it's very difficult to even get material. And as we move forward to, Madam Speaker, with new technologies and new supplies and materials are changing all the time. And if you look at some of the materials that are even used today, they already meet the standard of energy efficiency. They're changing it to the growing times and finding it to be a little bit more affordable. But, I agree that at this point it's so difficult to even get permits right now with the government still shutting down, and even with the vaccine, we're still going to see quite a bit of delay in a lot of things, and it would allow a little bit more time for the individual. So thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you, Minority Leader. On the amendment, Senator Taitano, you're recognized.
And I too rise in support of this amendment. The 2-year timeline just seems to make a lot of sense right now. We're not sure what the coming year ahead of us is going to look at like. We know that vaccines are on the horizon, but the length of time to get them here and how much of our population will have access to them, in addition to the other issues that were brought up, it just seems that this next year is going to be for trying to pick up the shambles of our lives and get them back in order. And thus having 2 years to be able to do that, but also starting to really plan ahead and get things put in place just seems reasonable at this time. So I do support the 2 years.
On the amendment, as amended, Senator Parrish, you are recognized.
Just a point of information, so the GTEC applies at the point of building permit approval. So it doesn't apply at the completion date of construction. So I think 2 years might be too long, considering that they've been waiting for over 6 years to get this implemented. And currently, as it stands, we are in our building code right now is the International Energy Conservation Code, which is for cold weather climates. So it doesn't make sense to have to, wait for 2 years when we already have something that's not suited for us right now.
Just a point of personal privilege, Madam Speaker.
State your point of personal privilege, Vice Speaker.
Thank you,
please.
Madam Speaker. From my own personal experience, I am building a house today, and it took me about 1.5 years because of COVID to get permits complete. And this is if you have good credit, and you don't have to go shop around for other banks. And then to get approval from the banks, it takes 3 to 6 months. Because the banks will give you a pre-approval, but they will not entertain you to sign off your loan unless you have all your permits to build. And so, Madam Speaker, I'm thinking about all of the families that have children to feed, that are living paycheck to paycheck, and that would like to build a home on their parents' property or the property that they've inherited. And it's difficult because you need to have this investment in the front end. So if your home is going to cost $250,000 to build and you can barely meet that requirement just for the build alone, and we all know that there are some construction companies that use cheap material,
Excuse me,
cheaper
Madam Speaker,
mirrors.
is this a point of
It's a
personal
personal
privilege or a point of
privilege.
information?
Point of
Yeah, I
personal
am-
privilege.
It's, to
Senator
me, it
Parrish,
doesn't
if I
sound
may,
like
I
a point of
was just
personal
allowing
privilege.
the Vice Speaker to finish with her point of information based on personal experience. I was going to allow her to close up and then entertain the rest of our colleagues. So, Vice Speaker, I may allow you to close, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Like I said, it's difficult for families to build, and this is going to impact the cost of their build. And many times, we've seen construction projects going the cheaper route so that they can even just afford to get the house up. Thank you for allowing me to finish, Madam Speaker, and I also want to thank my colleague for allowing me to finish as well.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. On the amendment, I'm going to take a moment's recess. Himina 35 na legislature in Guahan is back from recess. Are there anyone else wishing to speak on the Vice Speaker's amendment to the Paris original amendment? If not, Vice Speaker Nelson, would you like to close on your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I stated before, this is just an opportunity for the people who are really struggling during this time that would like to build a home, that it gives them more time to meet these requirements. It does not negate anyone from starting to implement the GTEC standards in their home if they have the money and are able to afford upgrading the new minimum energy standards. If they have that money, they can go ahead and do that. It's just giving more flexibility to the people who are looking to build their home which must meet the requirement if it's more than 1,200 square feet. And I feel that 1,200 square feet is a really small amount of footage if you have a family of 3 or 4 or 5. So this is what's going to impact those families who have been open to life and to having children. And so I think that it would be prudent. Well, for me personally, I would like to be prudent on that manner. And so, colleagues, I humbly ask for your support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the Vice Speaker Nelson amendment, are there amendment to the Paris amendment? Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion passes. On the Paris amendment as amended, anyone wishing to speak? If not, Senator Paris, would you like to close? Are there any objections to the amendment? If not, hearing no or seeing no objections, motion carries. Senator Paris, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have another amendment to add a co-sponsor. I want to add Senator Jose Pito Terlahi. I would like to thank him for hosting the public hearing and for all the work behind getting it on the floor.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. On the motion to put to the third reading, Senator Paris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank you to my colleagues for the spirited debate. And I think I just wanted to emphasize a couple points. And the one thing is the Guam Building Code Council is tasked with updating codes. And so there's still this opportunity to even provide greater exemptions for homes of a certain size. So currently the exemption is for 1,200 square feet. Upon reconvening, they could potentially expand that size should the need arise. And so I do encourage all the stakeholders to really engage the Guam Building Code Council as they update the Tropical Energy Code. The other thing I wanted to also emphasize is that the energy efficient mortgages, it doesn't affect the threshold. So yes, currently, there is an issue with the labor, the ability of labor. So GTEC is minimal compared to what that is. It's separate. It's separate and minimal compared to that. And the investment that someone makes in a building or a home will pay for itself. And it would also, it would help the environment and reduce the amount of cash that's being exported. And what currently in our code is really, does not suit Guam. It's the International Energy Conservation Code, which is really created for cold climates. And so what this code would do, it would tailor our building code to tropical environments. And it was created by local experts. And so we want to support local. That's what, one of the things this code does. It supports local labor force. It supports our local industry. And it supports a lot of these technical professionals as well. For decades, Guam did have a building code. And when our government updated all building and fire codes in 2010, it faced a choice to adopt a national standard that would require cold weather insulation and other building features unsuited for our tropical climate, or develop our own local version. And our government at the time made a wise decision to create a local version, the Guam Tropical Energy Code. The Guam Tropical Energy Code before us is a locally developed solution tailor-made for our unique tropical environment. It is a product of hundreds of hours of work by our local leaders in engineering, architecture, construction, and the real estate. And we must not simply adopt what's unsuitable, these unsuitable national standards that requires cold weather construction. We should tap into our local knowledge and create a code that's proper for our island. And GTEC is an admirable example of collaborative local expertise, creating a standard that's much better for our island. It would not only protect our environment, it would help our businesses and local families from this pandemic-induced economic downturn. For 40 years, energy codes have proven to be a win-win situation for developers and homeowners. Homes that meet GTEC standards are more valuable, which is good for local contractors. However, the combined mortgage and power bill is cheaper on a GTEC home, which is also good for homeowners. With Bill 413-35, we are not only protecting the environment, we are laying the foundation for a stronger economic recovery for our island. I sincerely thank the many local industry and technical organizations that made this code possible, and I respectfully ask my colleagues to support its passage. Suzu's Masi.
Thank you, Senator Paris. On the motion to place in the voting file, please.
I move to place Bill 413-35 COR in the voting file.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. We still have time to do Bill number 426-35 COR. Senator Taitsmo, you are recognized.
Sainamaasi Maske Halu. I would like to place Bill number 426-35 COR into the third reading file, and I would like to discuss it.
Senator Taitsmo, can you please read where the committee's from, who authored it, and the title, please?
Hungan. Bill number 426-35 COR is authored by myself, and this version is as substituted by the Committee on Heritage and the Arts, Parks, Guam Products, Hagåtña Revitalization, Self-Determination, and Regional Affairs. It is an act to amend subsection 3115 of Chapter 3, Title 5, and subsection 77105 and 77106A of Chapter 77, Title 21, all of Guam Code annotated relative to clarifying the appointment process of the Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation.
On the motion, you may proceed.
Suduas Maasi. So, as we are probably all aware, in the last several years, there has been very much a lot of confusion over the confirmation process of the Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation. Because of this, and because I have oversight over that entity, I placed in 3 separate requests for legal analysis. And in those requests, they found that there are 2 sections of the law that refer to that process, and hence this is part of what makes it confusing. One part of the process requires that the director needs the consent of both the governor and the legislature. This is actually a peculiar step, especially in that no other agency requires both the consent of the governor and the legislature. The bill is introduced before us today removes the redundancy of having the governor both appoint and then consent to her own appointment at the end of the process. The bill recognizes the governor's organic act authority to appoint heads of agencies and the legislature's responsibility to consent. The bill, as amended by the committee, amends the law to match the process of other entities. In fact, the clarifying language was obtained for how the process is outlined for the head of the Guam Economic Development Authority, to state that the governor will appoint the director upon the recommendation of the board that oversees that department and then upon the consent of the legislature. I ask for my colleagues' support in clarifying this portion of the law and having it be standardized with the other processes for recognizing and confirming directors.
On the motion, the main motion, are there anyone wishing to speak? Are there anyone wishing to speak? If not,
If I could have just a moment's recess.
I'll afford you that opportunity. Mina 35 na legislatura in Guahan is back from recess. Senator Tatino, you're recognized.
Sijuas Masi for the momentary recess, Speaker. We were able to talk about the amended version of the bill because the bill was amended from its original version, so it was a moment to be able to explain the changes.
So, Senator Marsh Tatino, I just want to make sure you're stating it right because what you just stated right now, as reported out, Bill 426 is as substituted.
Oh, I read it off of the agenda and it says as substituted. So I'm presuming, read it that way at the beginning. And right now I did just use the term amended. So
No,
the
that
correction
doesn't work.
is substituted.
Senator Marsh Tatino, we're going to take a moment's recess. As a matter of fact, it's 10 till 12 right now. We'll go ahead and take a lunch break. Majority Leader, on the motion, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to make a motion for us to recess and return at perhaps 1 o'clock, if that's okay with everyone.
We are in recess till 1 o'clock.